We're back on a Monday, the new year, off to a roaring start, ladies and gentlemen. This is CBB Review's flagship podcast. It's The Review, Brendon Hodges. I'm back again, not flying solo today, but the guys aren't here quite yet. It was a great weekend of college hoops to start off the new year. Great weekend of sports in general, actually. And we're getting to that part of the year where there's almost too much to watch. Good luck to everybody out there choosing on what they're going to spend watching during their weekend. You got NFL playoffs, you got college football closing up shop, you got college basketball just getting into the thick of things, and hockey's coming in a few weeks. We hope you stick with us here on the review, though, because we're into college basketball, and we want you guys to be too. So, again, like I said, a couple panelists set to join me here in a few minutes, but first, let me get into my starting five, and I had an idea for this coming into this morning, woke up, went downstairs to write it. And then news broke, and this was a lot better to talk about because it's a lot more interesting and something that all of us are looking forward to. An NCAA tournament update. And who doesn't love the tournament, right? The two panelists here will talk about this in just a few minutes, but if you don't know, we're going to have a bubble for the NCAA tournament. Indianapolis, really just the state of Indiana, and I love the idea. There are three main reasons why I do. Number one, and this isn't to say that any of us thought the tournament wasn't going to happen. It's going to happen, and we have further confirmation of that. Even if it is in Indiana, like people call the Midwest flyover states for a reason, right? You don't really want to drive through Indiana. No offense to people that live there. Like, I live in a flyover state, Missouri. It's a wonderful place. No backlash against that. But just further confirmation it's going to happen, and that they're finding a way to make it safe for the players, the coaches, the media members who may get to go, really everybody. And number two has to do with Indiana as well, that it being a central location. Watching games for the fans, it's great. Everything going on in Indiana, it's in the Eastern time zone, but it's in that little area where it's like right in between the Eastern time zone and the Central time zone, and people in Pacific time get to watch games that are like at 10 o'clock p.m. on the East Coast, and it's like 6 o'clock where they're living, so they don't have to worry about it. They can wake up, watch a game, eat lunch, watch a game, eat dinner, watch a game. It's going to be great for all the fans involved. But it'll also be great for all the teams involved. Because usually with the tournament, you have the four different spots in the bracket, and that's like the West, the Southwest, the Northeast, the Midwest, and that's where all the games are played. And sometimes teams get stuck into those brackets that really shouldn't because they're traveling across country, and it's a competitive disadvantage at points because you're going back and forth because classes and all that. Because it's a bubble in Indiana and it's there the entire time, it's not like they're going to be traveling. It'll make the games more competitive. It'll make the tournament that much more interesting, even though I believe that the best team in the nation's Gonzaga is probably still going to run the table, win the whole thing, but I digress. It'll make it that much more interesting to watch, so you don't have a team, for example, like Washington, having to fly to Miami to play a game or something like that, or like Philadelphia or wherever they would host it, and then having to fly back to Washington for a week of classes, and then you know the whole gist. Finally, my third point. We just saw a bubble in the NBA, and it worked really well. Mostly for the young players, and you want to know why? Because they were used to playing AAU. These are college kids. They were literally playing AAU as little as a year ago. It'll be an extended AAU tournament. We saw what the young guys in the NBA bubble were doing, like streaming video games or walking around and playing ping pong. Can you imagine 68 college basketball teams? Or forget that, the 32 teams that get to the second weekend, just kind of hanging out throughout the week at a hotel in Indianapolis. But I don't know about you. I think the college kids will take that very well, besides the fact they'll be studying a little bit. They'll be practicing. What else are they going to do? There are going to be so many cool things we'll see coming out of this NCAA tournament bubble, and so many other stories. Will there be bubble fatigue? Player interaction. Can you imagine Jalen Suggs and Jalen Johnson playing ping pong like 2 weeks before maybe they play in the Elite Eight or the Final Four? And how competitive that'll be, like off the court versus on the court. It's going to be great. And I think players, fans, coaches are all going to love it. But I'm just excited for the tournament, guys. It's going to be great. It's been a long time coming, especially after it was canceled last year, and we're all hoping it happens. And I think it should happen and will, because they have the bubble set up and they'll have it set up good. For now, though, let me go ahead and welcome in our two panelists for today's episode. Both have been here before. I've only been interacting with one of them so far because I had to ghost the other one on my way back from Florida. I'll introduce the new one first. Ariel Puterman, if I'm saying his name right. I don't want to botch it. You guys can unmute yourselves now. But Ariel, a Jayhawk.
Yes, Kansas Jayhawk, yes.
The mortal enemy of those from my home state for the longest time. He is here. Sam Bass also back on the review as well.
What's going on, everybody?
So we'll go ahead and just keep it on going with our first topic of the day, starting off with what's fresh off the presses. I just talked about it, everyone. You want to watch the men's NCAA tournament this year, you'll be spending a lot of time in the great state of Indiana. You probably won't be able to go anyway because of COVID, but whatever. That's right, though. The NCAA announced it'll be hosting the entire tournament in Indianapolis and the surrounding area in a bubble-like format. All 68 teams will come to compete for the national championship and play most of the games at different venues in Indianapolis. Those include Bankers Life Fieldhouse, Hinkle Fieldhouse, Farmers Coliseum. There are other venues, though, as well. Mackey Arena, Assembly Hall. You know them, you love them. The bulk of the teams will also be staying in hotels connected to the Indiana Convention Center. It'll also be used as a practice facility per this announcement. So let's talk about it, guys. What is the effect of this decision on the NCAA tournament as a whole? Let's go ahead and start with Ariel, and then we'll go to Sam.
I think this was a great idea. We saw how well the bubble worked. I think the two biggest things, you're sleeping in the same bed every night. I think a lot of people, like you said, like they have a lot of fatigue, sleeping in different beds, adjusting time zones, going to different practice arenas. So having that consistency, that's huge. That's going to make people play their highest level. Another thing is chemistry. After a game, after practice, these guys would usually hang out with their friends or go back and hang out by themselves. But now they have to interact with their teammates. We see so many teams at the end around that March time really click because they have that chemistry. Now they're going to even have a higher level, especially those younger teams who maybe haven't had as much time to practice with each other. They're really going to start to click. So we're going to maybe see some more upsets. We're going to see teams playing at their highest level. And I think this is going to be the best March Madness ever because of that reason.
I don't think there will be as many upsets. In fact, I think there will be less upsets prior to what everyone is kind of predicting for this season. And that is because they don't have to travel. And there are only 24 hours in the day. So the time spent not traveling will be going to practicing, watching film. And I think those better teams will get an even higher leg up because they have the ability to prepare and watch more film and learn more about their opponent. Usually upsets come because the team that was favorited did not prepare for a certain aspect of their game. And unless these mid-major coaches who are looking for an upset have something in their back pocket, there's really nothing you can do preparation-wise. These big-name teams, the Baylors, the Gonzagas, the Villanovas, they're going to prepare so well into these games, especially with the time not traveling. You're in the same place. You're getting used to it. I think that we could possibly see a Final Four with 4 1 seeds. It'll be very interesting to see.
It's interesting. There'll be a little bit of a disagreement here. One guy thinks there'll be plenty of upsets to go around. Sam, you think there will be no upsets. And it's hard to think of an NCAA tournament without that being as exciting as people expect. It's called March Madness for a reason. So where do you think the balance of that will be for both of you? We'll do the same order, Ariel and Sam. Where do you think the balance is for having upsets and having the best team still going in the Final Four?
Well, I'm going to have to agree with Sam on the first part. I do think the Gonzagas, the Baylors, the Villanovas, they're going to be the 1 seeds for a reason, and they're going to make it far. They've shown this year how good they really are. But it's the 5, the 6, the 7s, the teams that, they've earned their spot because they play in a power conference, but they weren't good enough to win. A lot of the Big Ten teams, I think, we'll see suffer that because they're just so worn out. And these mid-majors, they've been playing together. They're usually more experienced teams, and they'll have that high chemistry. They'll have that experience. So I think we're going to see a lot of upsets in that department. And I think, yes, we may see 4 1 seeds in the final, but we also may see a couple 3 seeds get upset early. We may see a couple 4 seeds upset early. And who knows, maybe this bubble won't make an impact at all. But just the whole idea of a new idea is really exciting for the sport of college basketball.
I think the upsets come into play when the coaching isn't experienced, because I think with all the time they have to prepare and all the film they'll have, I think it'll come down to in-game adjustments, practice time. So you're going to see teams with not a lot of March experience. I'm going to use an example. No hate for Rutgers, coming from my home state. I'm a big Steve Peichel fan, but he hasn't been there. He hasn't had the teams to get him to March. He had one last year, obviously couldn't play in March due to unforeseen circumstances, but he hasn't been there. He doesn't know exactly what goes into March Madness, when in other years he can get away with not particularly being as prepared as he would like because of the travel and other factors you're taking into it. So I think teams that don't have that experience, young teams especially, are going to struggle because they're not going to know what to do with the preparation, and the teams that are prepared are going to outperform them.
Well, like we said, we're really hoping the tournament happens, and this seems like the best step to get it to happen. So keep your fingers crossed, even though we're all pretty sure it will. Plenty of college basketball going on in the present, though, and over this past weekend of the new year. So there are plenty of also interesting stories looking into. And here are the biggest stories in college hoops since we last saw you. We'll start in the Mountain West, actually. Biggest comeback win in Division I so far this season, San Diego State. They had a 26-point lead in the first half against Colorado State. That lead obviously didn't last long. We said there was a comeback from behind win. They held a 67-64 lead late in the second half, but the Rams' John Tonji converted on a 4-point play to give them the lead. The Rams then would sink another pair of free throws to get the 70-67 win in what's now the largest comeback win in Mountain West history. Sam, how good do you think Colorado State feels right now?
They feel pretty good, especially because San Diego State is a borderline top 25 team. I think they're a little overrated, a mid-major team that maybe isn't up there with St. Louis. Obviously not Gonzaga. I honestly think Drake is one of the powerhouses in mid-major, although they haven't played anyone. But San Diego State has had consistent success in the past decade or so. They've been up there. They've had up and down years, but they have been elite at times. And any team at 26-point comeback feels amazing. It's incredible feeling. It really shows their perseverance, and they probably feel on top of the world right now.
All right, how about you?
You know, I don't really know what to say about Colorado State. I think this is worse for San Diego State because, they're such a good team. They've beaten Arizona State. They've beaten UCLA this season, two top Pac-12 teams, even though the Pac-12 isn't really what they used to be. Arizona State's a pretty good team, so UCLA's really proved themselves this season as well. So to lose that kind of lead, especially when it's that high, and to be at that high of a caliber of a team, it's just a really rough loss for them. I don't think it's really going to impact them long term, but to start off the new year like that, it's just not a good start for that team.
We'll move on to the Power Five, to the SEC specifically, and Jens, it did take John Calipari getting ejected, and it did take double overtime, but Big Blue finally got a win. Led by redshirt freshman Dante Allen, Kentucky beat Mississippi State 78-73 and ended their 6-game losing skid. They're now 2-6. Allen went 7 of 11 from 3 and scored 23 points. Next up for the Wildcats, another conference foe at home. They're playing against Vanderbilt. So, Ariel, is Kentucky back? Can they make a run?
I hate to say this, but I don't think they're back. Mississippi State, with no disrespect to them, they're not that good of an SEC team in a division or in a conference that's already probably one of the worst Power 6 conferences. But however, a win is a win, and maybe them winning a game because they haven't done that in so long, that's going to really boost their confidence. They've got a lot of good players in their team. Olivier Sarr's solid player. Brandon Boston, top 10 projected draft pick. They have the talent. They're just really not executing. And I think Cal, he's had so many teams like this, but he hasn't really clicked with this one. I think he needs to really do a better job of taking advantage of their strengths because they have so much talent. And really, if he can do that, then they can even finish as good as third in the SEC, but they're just not there yet.
Same question.
I'm going to kind of go on a metaphor here. When a shooter's in a slump and they see one go in, usually that follows with a bunch of other makes. Do I think that will happen with Kentucky? No. They're not clicking the way that they need to click in early January. They need to click. Like, if you look at every other team, in Division I. There's chemistry. They're executing their offense. They're executing their plays. Kentucky is not there yet. They're a step behind. They look like what a team should look like in early November. So do I think they can get there? Yes. Do I think they will? No. I'm also going to offer a hot take that if anyone watching this they're going to disagree with heavily, but it is possible. Kentucky wins a game after going on a skid when Cal's out. I wonder if playing under such a great coach gives them pressure, like makes the nerves rise, makes them feel like they need to be better than they usually are, and maybe that's causing them to do too much, make the tough pass instead of the easy one, take the three-pointer instead of the easy layup. That could be a possibility.
I'm going to add on to that, actually. We saw how Coach Cal handled the Cameron Fletcher situation where he kind of just asked him to lead the team. So it sounds like there is a lot of pressure. If you're not really playing your best, then maybe Cal isn't really the guy this year. Maybe his head's not in the right place. I think that there is that pressure. A lot of players look nervous. They don't look confident out there. So I don't know what's going on in the locker room. There's clearly some issues. And I don't know. I mean, this is probably the worst team Cal's ever had. And it has to start with him.
You also got to listen to his press conferences. You know, these kids are listening and watching his press conferences after the game. And he's really doing nothing to defend them. He's kind of taking shots at them every time, saying we're not on the same page. They're not executing well. And that just puts more pressure on the player themselves because they don't want their coach to be unhappy. They want to win too. But too much pressure can sometimes lead to anxiety, and you're throwing away passes and you're trying to do too much, which doesn't lead to wins, which is the problem Kentucky's have had so far.
That being said, pressure can still make diamonds. We'll see if it works out for Big Blue. Finally, last on the docket, on the women's side, do we have a rivalry in the making taking place later this week? Number 4 Connecticut plays number 7 Baylor on Thursday. It'll be the 9th time the teams have faced off, with the current series being tied at 4 wins apiece. Now, the Huskies obviously no stranger to the spotlight. They've been part of women's hoops' biggest rivalries for a long time. UConn Notre Dame, UConn Tennessee. Is this one, though, UConn Baylor, going to be even bigger than those? We'll start with Sam.
I don't pay attention too much to women's basketball, but I can tell that this will be UConn is always up there. Baylor is building that powerhouse. And I think anytime you get two teams that are in the midst of a dynasty, you have a rivalry. And that'll be so fun to watch for any casual sports fan, big sports fan. It's going to be an exciting rivalry to pay attention to these next few years.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. In the last decade, both those teams have been maybe not 1 and 2, but 1 through 5 in the college basketball. You know, UConn's been dominant forever. Baylor's really picked it up. And maybe it's not as big as the UConn Tennessee, which might not as be big as more since Pat Summitt retired, rest in peace. But definitely a big game, 2 great women's programs, and it'll be very exciting to watch this game.
Well, those are the stories since we last saw you. We'll go ahead and take a time out and regroup. Still to come, though, our panel will tell us their best moments from the weekend because they watch a lot of college basketball. And we have our 3-point play. Stick with us. This is The Review. We'll be right back. Check out the newly redone CBBReview.com for takeaways on the nation's biggest college basketball games, features, and our own bracketology. Our man Matt Majinski working hard on it, making it look even better than it did before, so check it out. For now, though, back here on The Review, Brendon Hodges, joined by Ariel, Puterman, Sam Bass. It's a pleasure to have you on board, both you guys and whoever's watching us today. And we're talking more college basketball. And we're going to move on to basketball in the moment. Biggest moments from the weekend, individual performances, big wins, clutch dunks, threes, whatever you want to say, maybe a block if that happens anymore in college basketball without a foul call. This is At the Buzzer. So to our panel, we'll go ahead and start with Ariel, and then we'll go to Sam. Let me hear it. What did you choose as your At the Buzzer clutch moment of the weekend?
I think it was Alabama upsetting Tennessee. Before this, since the SEC, like I mentioned earlier, they're so weak, I really didn't see anyone beating them in conference play. I really thought Mizzou was their only chance, and Alabama went in there, just absolutely outplayed them. They looked really good. They have a lot of great players: Josh Primo, Javon Quinterly, Jeremy Shackelford, John Petty, just so many great players. And they really showed that they're a team to watch. A lot of people weren't really paying attention to Alabama just because the conference was so weak and they really didn't have that impressive as a resume. So I think that is really a big turning point for them. And it really gives them confidence that they can even finish first in the SEC, as crazy as that is to say. And that is my big moment of the week.
I got mine. Marcus Zagorowski feeding Christian Bishop, slams it down, avoids the upset against Providence. Creighton remains a Big East powerhouse. We don't really know how good they are because the Big East is very good. But I'm looking forward a few weeks to when Creighton does play Villanova to see where they stand.
I was at the buzzer. Short to the point. That's what we like, gentlemen. Let's go ahead and push on to our next topic, though. Guys, there are still plenty of undefeateds left in college basketball. You see the graphics that like ESPN puts out or that we put out of the undefeateds, even if they're teams that haven't played yet. And usually we don't think that, it's a surprise that this team's undefeated. You know, they've earned it. They're the best team in the nation or in their conference or whatever. But in a year like this one, sometimes an undefeated team could be a surprise. So out of the remaining undefeateds that we have going through this year, who is the most surprising to you, Sam Bass? We'll let you go first, and then we'll go to Ariel.
I'm going to go with two. The first being Michigan. Just because the Big Ten is so solid throughout, the fact that Michigan is undefeated at this point, yeah, they didn't play great competition out of conference, but honestly, 2 weeks into conference play, the Big Ten has been totally even. I haven't seen anyone stand out to me. And Michigan somehow has gotten out there without a loss, which is impressive on its own because that conference is so deep and you're facing an even matchup pretty much every time you take the floor. My second is actually Gonzaga. Everyone knew that they were elite, but they have played such great competition thus far, and they've looked dominant. No one has looked like they could touch Gonzaga. They can shoot well. Obviously, their offense is there with Kispert and Suggs, but their defense is very good too. They swarm, they jump the ball, they get a lot of turnovers, and Gonzaga is great on both sides of the ball, and I think I'm surprised, not that they're undefeated, but how dominant they've been in that undefeated run. Obviously, the odds are that they're going to stay undefeated throughout the year. I think that they can run the table and have a perfect season this year.
You know, I'm going to have to agree with you on the Gonzaga one. You know, we all knew that they were the best team in the country, but, you know, they beat – sorry, do you guys hear that? Yeah, you know, they beat Kansas, a great team. West Virginia, a great team. Virginia, a great team. The game against Baylor was canceled, unfortunately, but you thought with all these great teams they played, they had to lose at least one, but they've come out on top of each one. So I think it's very surprising, and they've got such an easy conference. So they're just such a great team, and it's really surprising that they're still at that undefeated mark.
Well, I'd like to say thank you to Sam for giving our audience insight into my next question. Sam, I appreciate that very much. Out of the undefeateds that we've mentioned, and we can take Gonzaga off the board here because we see their conference, we know it's not the best, and we know Gonzaga is just, besides St. Mary's, really head over heels above everybody, and even this year I don't think St. Mary's can really touch them. But out of the undefeateds that we haven't mentioned, and Michigan can be included in this as well, which do you think has the best chance to run the table? Maybe not to the national championship. Let's just go through the regular season. We'll go with Sam and then Ariel again.
I'm not going to say Baylor because they haven't really had that test yet. Kansas is a very good team. We saw that Texas is a very good team in that conference. I think Baylor is just going to have too tough of a run. I'm going to go with my Bulldogs, Drake. They're playing in a fairly weak Missouri Valley conference. They're undefeated thus far. They swept Indiana State. The good thing about the MVC this year is that they're playing 2-game series. So rather than playing one team and then having them improve, you play them twice in a row, back-to-back days. That's honestly a leg up for an undefeated run, and I think Drake can actually go undefeated. I don't think they'll lock up a 1 seed just because of how weird this season is, but who knows? Maybe we'll see them in a 4 or 5 hole.
Did this man really just say he doesn't think Drake will lock up a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament? That is a hot take right there. It would be better if you said they would, but we'll go to Ariel. Ariel, your best chance to run the table. Who is it?
I'm going to have to stick with my Gonzaga pick here. They're just so good. They've already beaten all the teams they've already beat the best teams that they played. So I don't really see another team beating them. St. Mary's and BYU were the only other competitions, but St. Mary's got crushed by SDSU, and BYU, they beat them last year. They beat San Diego State earlier this season, but I don't know. Gonzaga's just so good. If they stay healthy, there's no one who could stop Suggs, Timmy, Kispert, Nemhard, Ayayi, the list goes on. So I'm going to go with Gonzaga with that one.
I want to go back to my point. Has there ever been a undefeated regular season team that hasn't been a 1 seed?
Wichita State.
Wichita State? Yes.
And I believe they were in the NBC at that time. So I'm sorry, Sam. I think your point is mute at this point. But a quick point before we move on. 3 undefeateds in the top 25 this week. Number 9, Michigan. Number 2, Baylor. Number 1, Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga is the safest pick to run the table. Baylor could. They could. But like you said, the Big 12 is pretty competitive. We'll go ahead and move on, though, to our 3-point play. And I have to say, we had quite the performance last time out from Matt Waldman. Got the 4-point play with some generous hosting by yours truly, but I digress. Gentlemen, you know how this works. I have 3 college basketball-related questions, and 1 point for each. Here we go. First up, we got to move quickly here because of the Zoom meeting limits. One of the first NCAA champions team, one of the first NCAA championship teams was nicknamed the Tall Furs. What team was this? You don't need the year. I just need the school. Their name was the Tall Furs. Your choices are Kentucky, Oregon, Indiana, or Kansas. We'll start with Ariel and then go to Sam.
Immediately I thought it was Stanford because they're the Cardinal. Their mascot's a tree, but that wasn't one of the options. So,
I really got to stop putting options on these, just making you guys answer them. That'll be for next time.
Oh, man, I think I'd get 0 to 4 every time then. But that's a hard one. I'm going to go with the fellow Pac-12 team here. I'm going to go with Oregon.
I agree. There are a lot of trees in Oregon. I think that has something to do with it somehow. So I'm going to go with the Ducks.
I'm surprised Ariel thought that was a hard question, considering that Indiana and Kansas have literally nothing in them, and Kentucky is very similar, and there are no fir trees there. Yes, it is Oregon. So 1 point for both our contestants today. I think that's the first time that's happened, actually. Newspaper editor L.H. Gregory called the 1939 Oregon Ducks. I believe they were actually called the Webfoots back then, though. The Tall Furs, because of the height of the team's players. Now, when I say height, I'm not talking like 7 feet tall, guys. Oregon was taller than most of the other teams of that era. It's the 1930s, 1940s. 3 Ducks were named to the All-America team that year following the season. Their center was 6'8". 6'8" center. His name was Slim Wintermute. 6'4" forward Lauren Gale and 5'8" guard Bobby Annett made the All-America team, and they called them the Tall Furs. Let's just put that out there. But 1 for 1 for both our contestants today. Just so you guys know, you are still chasing Matt Majinski, who is the only guy who has played this game twice. Matt Waldman right behind him. Ariel's actually got 3 points, so he's 1 point behind Matt now. And Sam actually 1 point behind Matt as well. On to the next question, though. Now, we've seen plenty of great scores in college basketball, but you don't often see a great individual offensive performance in the Final Four. So who has scored the most points in a Final Four game ever? Your choices are Bill Bradley, Bill Walton, Oscar Robertson, or Jim Herrick.
Before I answer, is this all time or in one game?
In one game.
Okay. Can you repeat the options? Sorry.
Yes. Bill Bradley, Bill Walton, Oscar Robertson, and Jim Herrick.
I'm going to have to go D here. I feel like all the older players, they were more, if you were good, then you were better than everyone else. So I feel like he was that guy.
Okay.
I'm gonna say Oscar Robertson. Dude was just a stud, college and NBA. Gonna have to give it all reliable here.
Well, we know somebody got it wrong, right? Unfortunately, both of you got it wrong. So the answer is actually Bill Bradley. He scored 58 points against Wichita State. The quiz I got this from actually said it was Bill Walton, but then I read the question and it said who out of the four has scored the most points in the Final Four game, which made a little more sense. So
that's why I asked that, because I knew Bill had the most, but I didn't think he had the most in one game.
He did not. Anyway, so unfortunately, unless you guys can convince me otherwise in the next 6 minutes, you won't be getting the 4-point play, because I actually have a really good question for that this time. It's not involving choices, but probably we'll save that for later. You do have a chance to tie Matt Majinski, though, for all-time lead at 5 points. So let's see if you can do that. So dunks. We love dunks, guys. We're seeing dunks in the men's game and the women's game in high school and like with 13-year-olds who are just crazy athletic, right? We love dunks, right? Can you guys dunk?
I cannot. I'm 5'6".
That's too bad.
I can dunk on a rim below 10 feet.
It's progress. Anyway, we've seen some teams, like especially Florida Gulf Coast, especially take on monikers because of their dunks. Dunk City. Great nickname, great highlights. We love it. Don't always do great in the tournament, but hey, what's it worth? If you can put a highlight reel together, it's all right. Before Dunk City, though, there were the Doctors of Dunk. Which 1980 college basketball program is that nickname referring to? Your choices are Kentucky, Iowa, Cincinnati, or Louisville.
I know in Iowa, they're not really known for their dunking now. They're known for their three-point shooting. I think it's still the same now. I'm going to have to go D again on this one.
See, I was kind of hoping Massachusetts was one of the options because Dr. J went to UMass Amherst. That would have been...
You know, usually when you have a nickname like that, it's not involving an individual, Samuel. It's involving an entire team. I understand your frustration and confusion, though. Please continue.
Kentucky's pretty flashy now, even though they're pretty bad. I'm going to go with Kentucky.
All right. Well, we picked the two Kentucky teams, and one of the Kentucky teams was right. It was Louisville. They were the Doctors of Dunk. Ariel wins this round 2-1, and I don't have to waste a 4-point play question unless you guys can give me an argument otherwise. Too bad I'm not listening to him today. But that's today's 3-point play, ladies and gentlemen. Ariel got 2 of 3, and his coach made him run one suicide because he missed the third free throw. Well done, guys. Ariel is now tied with Matt Majinski for the lead, and because he's on vacation, he probably won't be here soon. So take your chances to take the lead while you can get it, boys. Anyway, when we come back on the review, we'll have stories to start this upcoming week, game picks, and a little closing that you don't want to miss because these guys missed it on New Year's Day. Stick with us here on the review. We'll be right back. Follow CBB Review on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter. Maybe we'll get in a few other things in the future too, but give us a follow. It's good stuff. You can see the latest links to feature stories as well as game graphics. We had stuff for the NBA draft. That was exciting. I was there with Matt Majinski when he was making it. But like I said, plenty that you can see, and it's all really good stuff. You can even get stuff from this show, little clips, and we may even have our own page at some point in the future. That's foreshadowing. Anyway, full disclosure, like I said, we're getting into that. Actually, you can send us a message as well if there's something you think we should cover. We'll take a look at it, and you never know. Maybe it'll come up on a future show. All right, good stuff. But for now, back on the review. Brendon Hodges, Sam Bass, Ariel Puterman. Winter break, gentlemen, it's coming to it. You know, I'm driving my sister back to school tomorrow morning. That's going to be a hell of a day. I'm waking up at 6 a.m. to drive her to Louisville, of all places. She goes to Bellarmine, one of the newest Division I teams in the nation. Sam was here for that episode. He was here for that episode. That was a great episode.
It was. Had a lot of fun.
Bellarmine has won their last 2 games against, I'm not going to say inferior opponents because you schedule who you can schedule at this time of year, but a couple of Division III schools. They're starting off their first year in Division I pretty well, though. They're at 500 in the A-Sun going to the conference play. For now, though, we aren't talking about them. We're just talking about college hoops in general. Like I said, though, winter break, it's almost over. Student athletes going to be going back to campus, and they're going to have their studies and the games going on. We are going to have our studies and we're going to be watching games nonstop because that's what we want to do. That's what we want to do with our lives. That's why we're working on this podcast and for this site. But time flies, and soon we're going to be paying attention to everything, right? Especially who's going to make the tournament. We already talked about that, though. For now, we're going to be looking into the immediate future. Our writers always they're always watching college basketball. This might be their last couple weeks without school, so they can just watch basketball nonstop. It's a great thing. And they always have things they're looking forward to, whether it's mid-major storylines, women's basketball storylines, men's basketball storylines. Maybe somebody leaves school to get ready for the draft. Don't know why they do that, but anyway, you never know what you're going to get, and especially with these two. I believe when Sam was here last, we had a couple of interesting ones that people threw out. But here are our stories to start your week. We'll start with Sam, then we'll go to Ariel.
I'm looking at tonight. I don't know if this episode will go out tonight or tomorrow morning, but Oklahoma State facing a depleted West Virginia squad. Cade Cunningham, one of the best players in the country. I think Oklahoma State can give the Mountaineers some trouble. And then a little location bias going from New Jersey. I'm paying attention to Seton Hall and Rutgers. Both have tests. Seton Hall faces off with Creighton later in the week. Rutgers plays probably a worse Michigan State team than they're used to. I think Rutgers is very, very good this year. They shouldn't have trouble with that, but Michigan State is Michigan State. Tom Izzo's Tom Izzo. It's going to be a tough matchup. I want to see which New Jersey team really takes the cake as best in the state right now.
And I'm actually going to go with Michigan. We talked about them earlier. They're one of the last undefeateds, and they really have their hardest test this week. They play Minnesota on Wednesday. They've been one of the most surprising teams in the Big Ten. Marcus Carr playing like an All-American. So if they can win that game, then I'll learn a little more respect for them. They have Wisconsin coming up too, not this week, but next week. And then, like you said, how will West Virginia respond? Oscar Toshiba, one of the preseason top players, he stepped away from the program, and they lost the next game. So how can they respond? Can Coach Huggins adjust the game plan to really cater to those other players, Taz Sherman, Jeff McNeil, Derek Culver, of course? And this should be a great week for both those teams.
Well, plenty of story to go around, especially in the Big Ten with it being so competitive. For now, though, those are our stories to start your week. Speaking of the week, though, how about we do some game picks? We got a dozen games for you that you should probably pay attention to this week, some with big conference matchups, some in the mid-major range. For now, though, we'll go ahead and start with the SEC, and I apologize if any of these rankings are wrong because I did not have time to update them before we recorded today. First one, don't have to worry about it. Vanderbilt going to Kentucky. We talked about this a little bit earlier. Sam said Kentucky isn't back. Ariel kind of agreed with that as well. But it's an SEC matchup. Does Kentucky get their second straight victory? Let's start with Sam, then go to Ariel. We'll just keep going like that throughout the entire pick segment.
I think Kentucky does get its second SEC win. Vanderbilt has been at the bottom of the league for years. That program is really not going anywhere. I think Kentucky, even if they're not clicking, they have the talent just to beat them. I think it'll be closer than Coach Cal wants, but they should come out of there with a win.
I'm going to have to agree with you.
Sorry, you have a score, Sam.
We'll
you
go.
Know how this works?
We'll go 78-70.
I'm going to have to agree with Sam here. Kentucky's bad, but they're not Vanderbilt bad. I think that they'll try to figure it out. I think Brandon Boston's going to turn it around. And I'm not going to pick an exact score. I'm going to predict a winning margin. I'm going to say they're going to win by 10.
I see. He's a betting man. No love for the Commodores. They have one of the most interesting court setups in all of college basketball with the benches on the baseline, and no one likes them. Come on now. I know they're not good at football.
That's about all they got going for the program.
I understand they're not good at football either, but they had one of the best stories of the college sports season, and no one loves them. Now I want to root for them, but I'm not going to because I am impartial and not biased whatsoever. Anyway, moving on, ACC basketball. North Carolina, unranked, going to Miami, also unranked. The Tar Heels meet the Hurricanes, but who wins?
This is a tough one. I think North Carolina has the ability to finish top 3 in the ACC. It's a weak year for the conference, but Miami is tricky. Miami is Chris Likes, who is a matchup nightmare for anyone. He's short, he's quick, he can get under the defense. It really depends on how Roy Williams executes the offense. I think this will be an offensive matchup, but I think North Carolina has the better team. I'm going to go with a North Carolina victory, 82-74.
I'm going to have to agree with North Carolina winning this game. I think their bigs are really going to turn around. They just have too many bigs. I think they have to start Day'Ron Sharp over Baycott. I know that's a hot take. Day'Ron Sharp's the better player, even if Baycott's more experienced. If they don't, then I think they still win this game. I think they're going to win it pretty closely. I think they're going by 4.
Moving on to more SEC action. I believe they're number 13 now. Yes, number 13, Missouri. Their lone loss has come to in-conference rival Tennessee. Now they face off against the Mississippi State team that just lost a heartbreaker to Kentucky in a game that they thought they might have had won. So does Missouri keep up their success in the SEC on the road?
I think there's no question about it. Mississippi State lost to a bad Kentucky team. Missouri lost to a good Tennessee team. Missouri's going to want to bounce back. I think they will pretty handily. They'll win. It's going to be a blowout. I'm going to say 89-64.
I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. Mizzou just came off a big win against Arkansas, one of the more underrated teams in the country. And if you lose to Kentucky, then that's a bad sign. I'm going to also say Mizzou by 13 here.
I never thought I'd hear the words, if you lose to Kentucky, it's a bad sign in my lifetime. We just did, though. We see something new every day. Next on the slate, Rutgers visiting Michigan State. Michigan State fell a little bit in this week's top 25. They're down to 24th in the nation after a loss, dropped 6 spots. Does Michigan State turn it around, or does Rutgers get the win? I think I know who Sam's probably going to pick here because of his in-state bias, but maybe he'll surprise me.
I am going to surprise you. I'm going to pick Michigan State at home. Michigan State has great success on their home floor, even if there's no fans in the stadium. And Rutgers is dealing with injuries. I'm not sure who's going to be playing, who's going to be inactive, but Ron Harper Jr. and Cliff Omoruyi have both been inactive and active back and forth. I believe Cliff Omoruyi is out for an extended period of time. It's going to be tough for Rutgers. They're going to be playing with a lot of matchmaking, and I think Tom Izzo is just going to outcoach Steve Peichel in this one, come away with the win, move up a little bit in the rankings.
I'm actually going to have to disagree for once. I think that if Ron Harper plays, there's no way they win. He's that good. Michigan State doesn't really have anyone who could stop him. And even though he's like their best player, they've really shown how deep they are. Mathis has been good. Gio Baker in his return has been good. Miles Johnson has done a great job replacing Omoruyi. I think Michigan State, while they are a good team, they're not Rutgers good. So I'm going to go with Rutgers here.
Yeah, I don't really know what Rutgers good means or Vanderbilt bad, if we want to go into that. These are very interesting terms that you guys are using here. This is also why I like having other people on the podcast to make picks, because whenever I make picks, I was wrong. I'm pretty sure I picked Kansas to something happened with Kansas this weekend where I picked them to win, I picked somebody to win, then they lost by 30. I think that might have been Kansas this week for me. Anyway, we'll move on to the Big East. Georgetown facing off against Butler.
Well, first off, I want to go back to your point being extremely wrong. On my last episode, I said Iowa would prove that they're the best team in the country against Gonzaga because I severely underrated Gonzaga. And then they went out and whooped my Virginia Cavaliers. So that was very fun. That's a little karma coming back at me. As for this Big East matchup, Georgetown obviously lost a ton of talent this offseason. I believe they lost their entire starting 5. It's early in the Big East season. It's a competitive league. I think Butler's going to come away with this one. I'll say 72-68.
Yeah. With the game picks, I'm also not a pro. That's just how unpredictable this college basketball season's been, especially in the Big Ten. But we're talking about the Big East here, which has also been unpredictable. I think these are 2 middle-of-the-pack Big East teams. Neither of them are going to have much success in the NCAA tournament if they even make it. But with that being said, I'm going to go with Butler here. They're the slightly better team, in my opinion. I'm going to pick them to win by 2.
If you guys like me to put softball in there, I'll put Gonzaga versus the field in there if you want. It just wouldn't make it that much fun. Looking for games for you guys to pick. We do have a pretty fun one here, though. The team that made Sam Bass's earlier question about MVC teams going into the tournament undefeated, but as like a number 1 seed, put his question to bed. Wichita State, they're going to Houston this week, and I'm interested. Who do you guys think wins this one?
Houston just lost to Tulsa in what I thought could have been a perfect season and then came back with the solid win over SMU. Houston is a very, very good team. I know Jason of CBB Review loves the American, and he's high on Houston. I think Houston will win this one fairly easily, 79-64.
I'm going to have to agree. Wichita State, they're an interesting team. They had all the offseason drama with Greg Marshall. A lot of players threatening the transfer, some staying, some not. Houston, they've been great. Quentin Grimes, former Jayhawk, he's really taken another step. Kelvin Sampson's a great coach. I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with an 8-point victory here.
All right, moving on to some more ranked, unranked action. The Big Ten. The Golden Gophers. Oh, the Golden Gophers. They're making a name for themselves this year. You both have been surprised at them. But they're taking on a Michigan team this week. And if there's anything like a Big Ten rivalry, I don't know what it is. But Big Ten rivalries are great. Great. Minnesota, Michigan. It's at Michigan. Sam, your choice?
Michigan will fall this year. They will not finish with an undefeated record, but it will not be to Minnesota. I think Minnesota is a little overrated because people are so high on the Big Ten that if you win a game in the Big Ten, you're going to turn heads. You're going to turn heads if you beat anyone in the Big Ten, and that's what Minnesota's done. They've hit a little bit of a hot streak, but I don't think they're number 19 in the country good. That's what they're ranked right now. I think they're good. I think they're a tournament team, but are they top 20 in the nation? No, I think Michigan wins this by a score of 8. We'll say 69-61.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, this is a big game for Michigan. It's really their how good are they kind of game. And if anyone on Minnesota can guard Hunter Dickinson, limit him, he's been one of the best freshmen in the country this year, then I think they'll have no problem. I don't see anyone who can stop Marcus Carr. I'm going to go with Minnesota here. I'm going to go with a narrow victory, though. I'm going to go with a 5-point win.
Alrighty, Seton Hall. Oh, Matt Baginski's alma mater, Seton Hall. We love making fun of Matt Baginski on this program, even when he's here. They're taking on number 7 Creighton this week. Like we said, Creighton, big win, big avoidance of an upset this last weekend. Will Seton Hall pull an upset where Providence couldn't, though, Sam?
I feel pressured to say Seton Hall because if I don't, I'll be fired. This is a battle of front court versus back court. Creighton has Marcus Zagorowski. Seton Hall has Mamu Kelishvili. I really hope I said that right. I've been practicing. I think I got it. I like Creighton in this one. They have much better shooters. They execute better on offense. It will be close, though. I think they'll win 79-77.
I'm actually going to keep my job for another week. I think that since Bryce Aiken came back, they've been a whole nother team. They've been honestly top 25 level good. They beat Xavier, who was a really good team, and I think they've really improved. Like you said, Sandro, whose name you killed, by the way. Great job, Sam. I think he's been one of the best players in the Big East. And Miles Cale, Jared Rhoden, a lot of good players. I think they're going to win this game by 7.
There's a lot of talk here about people getting – do you guys even get paid to work for the site? I mean, can he really fire you? He seems like such a nice guy. I'm gonna have to ask him about this when he gets back from vacation.
Oh, he has too much power. He doesn't know what to do with it.
Too much. Okay, I'm gonna have to ask him about this after he gets off of vacation. Matt, if you're watching this, give me a call. All right. Anyway,
last podcast.
Indiana taking on Wisconsin. I don't know what to say about this because we just had a very interesting conversation. So, Sam, who wins, Indiana or Wisconsin?
Indiana's been very up and down, but so is Wisconsin. I love Trace Jackson Davis for the Hoosiers, but Wisconsin's more well-rounded. They're playing at home. I think Wisconsin will wind up taking this one by a score of 84-71.
Yeah, they just got the news about the bubble. They're probably pretty excited. They'll have home court advantage if they make it, but right now they don't have that home court advantage. Well, not as much, and I think that Wisconsin, they're the much better team. Indiana's kind of separated themselves. It's not top 25 level, but good level, but they're not bad like Nebraska or Penn State. So I think Wisconsin falls in that top tier in the Big Ten. I think they're going to win this game by 12.
Well, next up, we got a battle for Illinois. Never thought I'd be saying that either. Northwestern out of the rankings this week. Sad. It was a nice run for the Wildcats, right? Top 25, couple of big wins, kind of falling back to earth, though. They're at home, and they're hosting Illinois, who has also kind of fallen off a tiny bit. They had a great start to the season. They've lost 3 now, and not in a row, but they lost 3 in pretty quick succession. So who wins the battle for Illinois?
I'm going to say Illinois. And that's because Kofi Coburn has really been the deciding factor for the Illini. Obviously, Io's had a great season, but Kofi Coburn, when he plays well, Illinois wins if you look at that trend. And I think Northwestern really doesn't have anyone to stop him. Their best center doesn't really get that many minutes. He gets into foul trouble, doesn't really have a high block percentage, doesn't guard the post well. I just think that Kofi Coburn will have a monster day, and they'll take the state of Illinois.
I must say about Northwestern, I'm very impressed with them this season. I picked them to finish 13th in the Big Ten. But with that being said, I feel like every year there's that one team that wins a lot of games, and then when they lose that game, they just go into turmoil. We saw that with Ohio State a few years ago. I think this year's team is Northwestern. I think they're going to finish towards the middle of the pack with a losing record in the Big Ten. Illinois is so good. They have Ayo, who's a top player in the country. Kofi, as you mentioned, a lot of talented freshmen. I'm going to go with Illinois here by Let's say 6.
All right, and then our last 2 picks come to us courtesy of the Pac-12 because we love the Pac-12, even if they get made fun of sometimes for being the weakest, arguably one of the weaker Power 5, Power 6 conferences. Washington at Stanford.
I am high on Stanford, and that might just be because they play in a weak conference, but I think Stanford can contest Oregon in the Pac-12 tournament. I think Stanford's just overall a good Pac-12 team, which I know we're doing a lot of the good this team, good, bad this team. But I do think that Stanford will emerge as one of the top teams in the Pac-12, and I think they'll win this one handily, 68-59.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. Washington is very bad. Stanford, a little disappointing this season. They have De Silva, who's been great. And Zaire Williams hasn't been that good. Bryce Will's also a good player. I think that their record doesn't really show how good they are. And I'm going to pick them to win this game by 20.
All right. Lastly, UCLA heading down to Arizona State. It was an Arizona State team that everyone was pretty high on coming into the season. And aren't necessarily living up to the expectations of our crew so far, but who wins, UCLA or Arizona State?
I'm going to say Arizona State. We haven't heard much about Remy Martin since non-conference play, and he's bound to pick it up. He aside from the studs on Oregon, LJ Figueroa and Eugenio Marie, Remy Martin is a very good player, and I think that he hasn't shown as much or hasn't made as much noise as he could be. And UCLA is very weak defensively. I think Arizona State will win by 2 on a Remy Martin clutch jump shot.
You know, I live in LA when I'm not at Kansas. I grew up a UCLA fan, and I'm going to have to pick UCLA here. They did just lose Chris Smith, but they are so deep. Johnny Juzing's starting to look better. And Jalen Hill's been good. Cody Riley. I think that they will win this game. Josh Christopher, it really depends on how well he plays. When he's on. They're hard to beat. So, but I don't think that they'll have enough in them. I think UCLA is going to win this game by 1.
Well, good stuff, guys. Those are our dozen picks for this week. That was a great insight. We learned a little bit about our boss. That was a great conversation we just had, gents. Hopefully you all are here next week for another episode. To end today's show, though, usually we just say, oh, that's it. See you later. We'll send you off into the week. We're going to do a little something different today, though. So for those of you who kept up with the show, and I kind of made this happen as well. I was flying solo in the last episode. New Year's Day, I didn't want to have anybody on to if they wanted to relax for New Year's. You all were probably out partying or something like that because it's New Year's. It's what people do. Of course, though, it is COVID year, so we're all very responsible. I gave my New Year's resolutions for college basketball at the beginning of the show. I gave you a couple of New Year's resolutions towards the end of the show for different teams. It was a shorter episode, but it was fun. So because these two were nice enough to join me today, I'd like to hear their New Year's resolutions to end this show out. We'll start with Ariel, and then we'll go to Sam. College basketball New Year's resolutions, gents. Nothing too personal.
Well, mine is actually going to have to do with the NCAA. They've been really stalling on this Kansas decision. It's really affected them. We don't know if they're going to have a postseason ban. We don't know. It's really hurt them recruiting-wise. So I think they just really need to make a decision, whether that is to give them that postseason ban, recruiting bans, or just not giving them that something at all, or just making them pay. But I think it's been too long. It's been over a year now. It's time for them just to make a decision.
I mentioned briefly on Twitter, which I think is it'll take a lot, but it's an interesting idea, is let's get more conference versus conference challenges in non-conference slate. ACC versus Big Ten has worked out so well, and you see more and more getting introduced. Why not eventually down the road turn the entire non-conference slate into a conference versus conference tournament? You face off against each other. You're playing for something more rather than just points, like quad wins, stuff like that. Why not make non-conference play more exciting, more competitive? You kind of have that conference versus conference, and then you go right into conference play. It's something interesting to look at. Maybe just this year do to a conference and then go from there. But I think that's something interesting to look at for non-conference play as a whole.
Especially if it's on a rotating basis, it would make things very interesting. Conference versus conference matchups. Some conferences be more competitive than others, and it would definitely be interesting. It's a great suggestion. Well done, guys. Great stuff. Thanks for joining me today. Sam, Ariel, it's been a pleasure as always, bringing you guys on to talk. It was great, honestly, and I hope you guys can come on soon. And thanks to all you guys who are watching us on YouTube or keeping track on social media for this episode of The Review. Be on the lookout for our next episode coming to you on Friday. We'll see what we talk about then. Plenty of stuff could happen over the course of this next week. And just do me a favor. Watch it all. Love it all. Talk about it. Send us messages of stuff that you want us to talk about. We'll plan on doing this again on Friday. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you then. This has been The Review.